Hi, my name is Nick, and I'm going to draw my life. Well, a very important part of my life. Last year, me and my family went abroad to spend a year in France. During the summer before, I had avoided thinking about the impending school year. So the first day took me by surprise, especially having to wake up at 7 that morning. I remember I spent that entire morning completely in shock and unable to believe what was actually happening. When I finally got to school, I was almost in a trance. I was so nervous I could barely figure out what was going on around me. I saw 4 different lines and I had absolutely no idea where to go. I made my way towards the nearest adult, and luckily she understood my problem and pointed me towards the quatrième line. Unfortunately, right about this time, the teacher got up in front of all the students and started talking about me. All the eyes turned towards me. At this point, honestly, I was scared. The teacher came to get us and took us upstairs, and this is where I sat. The kid next to me was named Charles, and he was rather nice. He helped me out through that class. Later, in the equivalent of French study hall, 2 kids named Ludovic and Kevin came up and invited me to have lunch with them. After this, I was rather happy for a while. They taught me important French words, and I was really fitting into their group. Then stuff started to become a little bit rough. A lot of their small cultural things started to really bug me, especially all the spitting. People would stand at break and make little puddles of spit below their feet. I started to dislike some of the people I used to call friends. In particular, I disliked Kevin because he always bugged me in class, and Jimmy because one time he accidentally spat on me, and because of this, I ended up tackling him. I was very angry. I couldn't understand why they would ever want to do this. My new realization that I hated my class, I decided I needed a new group of people to spend time with, so I went to the troisième, or 9th graders. I decided the 9th graders were much more mature and much more fun to hang out with. My new companions were Guillaume, Brice, Eloise, and Jessie. During class, I stayed separate. Any minor interaction between us angered me. I resented how they were different. When I spent some time reflecting, I remembered my parents telling me that the reason I was here was to learn the French culture, and this is what I was currently rejecting. With this revelation, I became open to all the people in my grade. Kevin and Jimmy went from being 2 people that I despised to being 2 of my closest friends. And many other classmates that originally I disliked became my friends. I no longer thought of my classmates as inferior because of the cultural differences. I accepted that they were just different, and that I was no better. I started to feel like I was becoming French, and that I was doing a very good job adapting to the French culture and becoming part of the community. I was proud to say that I was becoming a regular old Frenchman. Because of my struggles at the beginning of the year, anything that I thought might be an insult to my ability to blend in with French culture and adapt very much offended me, even if I didn't realize it at that point. Ludovic started to make fun of my accent. He would say, "Je parle comme toi," using a very bad French accent, and then tell me that's how I sounded, even though I believed that my French accent was much better than that. Whenever he would do this, I would practically throw a fit and yell at him and get extremely mad. However, this was a good opportunity to use some of the words they taught me at the beginning of the year. Again, I started to become isolated from my peers because of this. Even though they meant it as a harmless joke, I took it very seriously. I could not figure out why him doing this made me so angry. Luckily, I eventually got him to stop doing it by just laughing it off. Reflecting on it now, I realized that why I got so angry was because I felt like he was insulting my ability to become part of the community, like he was trying to push me out. Now that there were less social problems that I had to deal with, I turned my attention towards grades and school. I quickly realized that grades were very different here, and that the definition of a good grade and a bad grade were very different from in California. More specifically, Prairie. One time a kid told me that if he got less than a 9 out of 20, his parents would hit him, and at first I felt bad for him, but then I thought, how is it even possible to get that bad a grade? Having been raised in such a competitive environment, I was astounded by what happens when people completely don't try. At first, I struggled to try and get very high grades, because that's what I was used to doing at Priory, and I assumed there was adequate competition here. But after getting a C, and looking over at my friend's paper and seeing an F, I was rather reassured. I became overconfident, seeing that I was above average, even though I was in a French school. Instead of being a Prairie student, fighting for the top grades, I started to become careless. No longer would I complain if I got a C. I was perfectly happy with anything above an F. Unfortunately, I was letting my standards slip to where the French people's were. I was shocked to find out that the whole world wasn't like Prairie, and it had a very negative effect on my motivation. My grades were still above average, but I was not trying my hardest. My friends didn't try, so I didn't try. One time I remember Kevin got a .5 out of 20 on a test, and the .5 was for participation. Needless to say, I didn't really have a good role model, grade-wise. With all this time not spent working on grades, I had lots of free time to spend with my friends and absorb the culture. All this time with my friends helped me learn the language. Even though I might not have learned as much as I would have in the US and school, I learned a lot on the streets of France with my friends. I gained a different type of knowledge. One time, my friends invited me to hang out with them after school. At first, I was excited and happy to go, but once I realized what they did, I was less happy. I learned that they basically have their own little hideout where they go and smoke and play smoking games for hours. For hours, I sat there bored, refusing to smoke, and just waiting for my dad to arrive to come pick me up. All they did was smoke, hit each other, and light plastic on fire. All things I grew up being told not to do. Being educated where I was, I had been taught to think very poorly of cigarettes. So I avoided smoking. When my dad finally arrived to pick me up, I was more than happy to go. The first thing I asked when I got into the car was, "Do I smell like smoke?" After this, I decided to attempt to help my friends quit. I knew they both liked sports, so I talked about the negative effects it has on your athletic ability. I was unable to convince Jimmy, but after a while, I was able to convince Kevin to smoke less and then eventually quit. What surprises me most is how this brief 12 months of my life was able to permanently alter how I view differences in people. When attempting to formulate somewhat of a rule that my experiences in France have taught me to abide by, I turned to the cliché saying, "Don't judge a book by its cover." I combine this with the Benedictine value of hospitality. Even though I spent years being told to abide by that value, I didn't truly understand it until after I returned from France. It is not just about being friendly when accepting guests, as the dictionary might suggest, but it is looking beyond cultural differences, well, all differences. I was taught to be accepting and look at people as individuals. Every different group might have a certain aspect that one finds obnoxious or even infuriating, but if you take the time to look deeper, you might find something that surprises you, like a lifelong friend. The 12-month snapshot in France also changed our family. As did I, my sister and my parents bumped into the oddities of French culture. We grew closer as we wondered whether others were talking about us. I smile now because even today in California, as we did in France, dinner does not start until 20 hours. My sister and I also became closer. The two of us shared an understanding of fright, frustration, and elation that came with our many days, evenings, and nights in France. So we had no choice but to turn to each other for help or often consolation. In the end, I'm very glad that I got the opportunity to go to France. Even though I spent the year slacking on grades, I was able to go back to my normal self when I returned to California. Through my experience in France, I gained another side of me. I can now speak French and have long-term friends that even a year after, I speak to almost every day. I am very glad that I got the opportunity to go, even if it means that I'll be forever referred to as that Frenchie